Hey guys, tonight we're sliding straight into a chapter of history even messier than your last group text. The not-so-glamorous reality of being a single woman in 1930s America. Not the movie starlets, not the jazz-age flappers, but the real women, dodging landladies, trying to eat on 50 cents a day, and fielding more unsolicited advice about marriage than you get ads for hair regrowth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is, because somewhere, right now, there's a single woman staring at her ceiling and contemplating whether she can afford another can of beans. Now dim those lights, put on a fan for that soothing white noise and get comfortable. Tuck yourself in so the imaginary building super doesn't barge in, and ask why you're not married yet. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to be single in 1930s America? What if dating apps were replaced by your mother mailing your photo to local bachelors? Was your social life just gossip, bridge, and the looming threat of spinsterhood? Could you even eat dinner alone in public without someone calling your parents? How did you survive on a secretary's wage when a decent hat cost more than your weekly rent? And did you really need to iron your undergarments just to be presentable? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1934, your window's stuck open, your stockings have more runs than the Boston Marathon, and you're already wondering if your roommate ate your emergency peanut butter. Good luck. You open your eyes to the symphony of floorboards creaking, distant snoring, and someone boiling cabbage for breakfast. Welcome to the boarding house. 3 beds, 1 door that sticks, and the faint hope you'll find your slippers before Gladys does. Privacy? Not unless you count the curtain strung across your corner. Let's talk about waking up in a Depression-era boarding house. Your alarm clock is the sound of Gladys's wheezing snores, a clatter of spoons in the kitchen, and the unmistakable scent of boiled vegetables seeping through the paper-thin walls. It's less gentle sunrise, more early morning root cellar. The blanket clings to you with a damp stubbornness, and for a moment you debate whether you're awake, or just reliving last night's dreams of endless laundry and lost rent money. Your bed is a marvel of 1930s engineering, lumpy mattress, springs that poke you like they're charging rent, and a patchwork quilt older than Social Security. It's just warm enough to lull you into a false sense of security, just itchy enough to keep you from actually relaxing. Somewhere at the foot, your only decent pair of stockings is curled into a ball, a small miracle if they haven't migrated into Gladys's territory overnight. Above you, the ceiling sports cracks that form abstract patterns, nature's original wallpaper. Across the room, Ethel rolls over and mutters something about needing another hour. You'd love another hour too, but the boarding house has its own ecosystem. Sleep too long and you risk missing the hot water, or worse, the only available bathroom slot. The early bird doesn't just get the worm, she gets a head start on the wash basin. The moment you sit up, the realities of communal living come crashing in. Every movement is a negotiation. Do you risk the squeaky floorboard, knowing it'll wake up the resident light sleeper, or do you tiptoe, hoping the drafty window doesn't swing open and send a polar breeze down your nightgown? The answer is always both. In 1930s America, there are no small decisions, only degrees of inconvenience. You shuffle to your makeshift nightstand, a repurposed orange crate, where last night's glass of water has attracted a mysterious film, and your alarm clock ticks with existential resignation. If you want to brush your teeth, you'll have to elbow past the other women, who have their own hygiene rituals and a tendency to guard the good soap like it's contraband. Breakfast in a boarding house is a contact sport. You're not sure who actually likes cabbage for breakfast or if it's simply what was on sale. There's a pecking order for the toaster and a social contract about who gets to open the window. The conversation, when it starts, is a gentle blend of complaints, gossip and reminders that the rent is due Friday. As you navigate the morning, you try not to trip on Gladys's shoes, which multiply like tribbles by the door. Every single possession must be guarded, labelled, and, when all else fails, hidden under your bed. Even then, nothing is safe. Borrowing is considered both a crime and a way of life. There's comfort in the chaos, though. You and your roommates develop a language of glances, shrugs, and eye rolls, an entire dialect designed to communicate. I know the radiator's broken, but let's pretend it's summer. In the thick of the Great Depression, single women sharing space also share strategies for survival, splitting the cost of tea, pooling coins for coal, and forming temporary alliances in the eternal war against the landlady. And just as you finally find your slippers and start to feel human, you catch your reflection in the chipped mirror. The face staring back at you is tired, determined, and maybe, just maybe, a little amused by the absurdity of it all. Welcome to another day in the boarding house. The world outside may be falling apart, but in here at least you're in it together. And tonight, when you crawl back under that scratchy quilt, you'll laugh with the others about Ethel's snoring, Gladys's missing slippers, and the endless cabbage. Because as brutal as it is somehow, this life is yours. Down the hall you wait your turn for the bathroom. If you're lucky, the water's less freezing than the stare of Mrs. McCloskey when you borrow her soap. The mirror's cracked, your towel's damp, and you have about 6 minutes before someone pounds on the door demanding you hurry up. Self-care? Mostly just not scalding yourself. Let's set the scene. The boarding house hallway is a gauntlet of slippers, whispers, and doorways that let out just enough steam to suggest that someone, somewhere, might have found a few seconds of warmth. You clutch your toiletries and a sliver of soap as you shuffle past Gladys, who's already halfway through her morning routine, which seems to involve equal parts hairpins and humming. Bathrooms plural is a fantasy. There's one, and it's seen more foot traffic than Grand Central. If you want a shot at hot water, you'd better be up with the milkman or be ready to bribe someone with your last stick of chewing gum. More likely, though, the only thing steaming in there is someone else's towel, left to hang damply over the single radiator like a flag of perpetual defeat. When you finally make it inside, you're greeted by a parade of mismatched tiles, a toothbrush cup with more mystery stains than the city map, and a faint scent of ammonia that promises last night's cleaning didn't stick. The cracked mirror gives you a funhouse glimpse of your own dishevelled face, which you attempt to tidy up using approximately 3 ounces of water and a lot of hope. Washing up is an exercise in logistics. You juggle soap, toothbrush, and the eternal question, can you manage a full face wash before the water turns from glacial lake to icicle factory? There's a delicate balance. Run the tap too long, and it might protest with a sound like a dying accordion, but don't run it at all and you risk being labelled that girl at breakfast. Somewhere in the distance someone flushes, and the pipes rattle with indignation. Towels are a rare commodity, the softest ones having been quietly claimed by the fastest hands. Yours is perpetually damp, a shade of grey that suggests it wants new colour, and only big enough to dry exactly half of you before it gives up. You develop a new appreciation for air drying, which in January just means dancing awkwardly around the single window, hoping no one walks in. If you have hair longer than a bob, you're in for an extra round of suffering. The 1930s didn't come with ionic blow dryers, just bobby pins, hope, and the cruel, slow march of evaporation. The best you can do is towel squeeze and pin up the rest, hoping the whole structure stays put until lunch. Curls are a gamble. One wrong move and you're sporting the frightened sheepdog look all day. Self-care in a boarding house is a delicate ritual, more about surviving the process than emerging transformed. The concept of me time is a foreign luxury, drowned out by the inevitable pounding on the door as Ethel yells that she can't wait all day. You eye the half-used soap sliver. Does it belong to you, Gladys, or some ghost of tenants past? At this point, you just pray it's not poison ivy. There's camaraderie in the chaos, though. Every woman is part of the same morning lottery, each one learning the subtle art of not glaring too hard at whoever snagged the hot water. You trade stories, tips, and sometimes toothpaste. You become adept at making do, at moving quickly, at not sweating the small stuff, which luckily is hard in a bathroom this cold. By the time you emerge, towel draped around your neck and dignity mostly intact, you feel like you've completed an Olympic event. Victory is measured in degrees of both warmth and patience. The day is just beginning, and if you can survive the morning bathroom rush, you can handle whatever else the 1930s wants to throw at you. It's 7:23 a.m. and you're ironing your last clean blouse, by which you mean the one with the fewest stains. Your stockings have more ladders than a fire station, but with some luck your skirt's hem hides the worst. You try for smart and respectable, land somewhere closer to desperate but hopeful. Getting dressed as a single woman in 1930s, America is not so much a morning routine as it is a delicate negotiation between dignity and available resources. You start by assessing the battlefield. There's the skirt you mended for the 3rd time last week, a slip that's more holes than fabric, and a selection of blouses that recall better times. No item matches another, but with enough tucking, pinning and praying, you might pass as presentable for a brief optimistic window. Fashion, for you, isn't about self-expression, it's about survival. Your entire wardrobe fits in a battered suitcase under the bed, sharing space with love letters, overdue bills, and an emergency can of sardines. The colours are faded, the collars are wilted, and your sole pair of heels clicks unevenly, like a metronome having a nervous breakdown. But in 1934, presentation is everything, so you turn the act of getting dressed into a strategic campaign, hide the frayed cuffs, pin the tear in your hem, and pray that no one notices your left sleeve is technically a different shade than your right. You glance in the cracked mirror and make your daily assessment. The face staring back is determined, perhaps a touch weary, and almost certainly covered in a thin film of steam from the laundry boiling on the stove. You dab at your cheeks with a little borrowed powder, thank you Ethel, pencil in a hopeful eyebrow, and decide once again that today is not the day for lipstick. Lipstick, after all, is for payday and parties. Today is for keeping your job. Stockings, those delicate little miracles of modern fashion, are your greatest challenge. The run down your calf is threatening to become a full-on landslide. You sit on the bed, squint, and carefully apply clear nail polish to stop the damage, a trick passed down from roommate to roommate like a sacred text. You smooth out the fabric, hoping the world is too busy worrying about its own depression to notice you're wearing hope and a prayer. The act of getting dressed becomes a form of silent resistance. You iron your collar sharp enough to make an impression, and pin your curls just so, channeling the confidence of movie stars you see in matinee newsreels. Deep down, you know no amount of starch or careful pinning can erase the facts. Clothes are expensive, the economy is grim, and being a single woman means you're forever one step behind fashion, but always one step ahead of complete disaster. There's a camaraderie in the chaos. You and your fellow boarders swap blouses and scarves like playing cards, keeping a running tally of whose skirt has made the most appearances at job interviews this month. Someone once said that style is knowing who you are. In your case, it's knowing where you hid the good brooch. When you finally emerge from your corner, you're a patchwork of effort, thrift, and pure willpower. The hallway is already alive with commentary, Gladys exclaims over your new blouse. She wore it last Thursday. And Mrs. McCloskey gives you a look that says she's still not over the incident with the borrowed hat pin. But you lift your chin and join the parade, blending into the sea of women all armed with a version of respectability. As you step out the door and into the world, you brace yourself for the silent judgments. The neighbour who tuts at your scuffed shoes, the shop girl who seems to have a new dress every week, and the landlady's constant appraisal of your prospects. Still, you walk tall. Your clothes might be threadbare, but your spirit is stitched together with stubbornness, ingenuity, and a dash of defiance. In 1930s America, that's as fashionable as it gets, and if the skirt rides up and the stockings sag, well, that's just proof you've survived another day. Breakfast is a social event, meaning everyone eyes your toast, your jam, and your prospects. The radio mumbles out news of bank failures and someone's always out of sugar. The real feast? Gossip about who got a letter from a gentleman caller and who's been seen talking to the milkman. In the boarding house kitchen, the morning meal is part survival challenge, part theatre, and always a little bit cutthroat. You enter the cramped linoleum-floored room and are instantly hit by a wave of conflicting smells, burnt toast, stewed prunes, someone's emergency sardines, and always the ghost of last night's cabbage. Your stomach rumbles. Your soul, however, recoils. There's only one toaster, and it is older than some of the residents. Every morning a tense standoff develops around it, with bread slices stacked on a plate like poker chips. If you want breakfast at a reasonable hour, you'd better have sharp elbows and faster reflexes than Ethel, who guards her spot by the stove like a Depression-era dragon. Meanwhile, Gladys debates the best way to get more jam out of an almost empty jar, employing techniques that should require a mining license. Seating is first come, first serve. You squeeze onto a wobbly stool, balancing your chipped teacup with one hand while using the other to keep your toast out of the jam crossfire. Someone always has news to share, a neighbour's engagement, a shop closing, or the latest scandal about the landlady's nephew and his unusual hobby. In a world before smartphones, breakfast gossip is the main course. You become fluent in the language of whispers and sidelong glances. Who got a letter with a strange return address? Who didn't come home until midnight? Who's hiding a new bottle of cough syrup in her coat pocket? The radio drones in the background, sometimes offering up swing music, sometimes the grim financial report, banks failing, breadlines growing, and the price of butter climbing out of reach. As you spread your meagre jam, you try not to think about it. The world outside is full of uncertainty, but inside the real challenge is whether you can snag the last sugar cube for your tea. There's always at least one person who forgets to buy sugar. She makes the rounds with a hopeful look, and soon every cup in the room is subtly nudged away from her. Sorry, all out becomes the morning's refrain. In a pinch, someone might offer you a spoonful of honey, if you're family, or at least not a direct rival for the bathroom. This daily ritual is also an unspoken fashion show. Under the harsh light, every threadbare hem, every carefully repaired stocking, every creative scarf arrangement is on display. You watch and learn how to hide a stain with a well-placed brooch, how to revive a tired collar with a dab of cold tea. Appearances matter, even when your breakfast budget is 5 cents and you're running on hope and boiled water. Yet despite the competition, there's solidarity here too. If someone's toast burns, a sympathetic groan rises. When the jam runs out, there's a brief but sincere moment of collective grief. Someone inevitably cracks a joke about the landlady watering down the milk again, and laughter ripples through the group. A gentle reminder that, for all its pettiness, this little society runs on kindness as much as caffeine. Before you're done, the kitchen devolves into a clean-up frenzy. Plates are scraped, crumbs swept up, and everyone scrambles to clear a space for the next wave of hungry tenants. You grab your coat, your work bag, and take a last look at the breakfast table, now littered with crumbs, empty cups, and the remains of a half-hearted argument about politics. Out in the hallway, the day is waiting. But in these fleeting moments of toast and tea, you found a strange comfort, a shared, stubborn joy in surviving the absurdity together. And tomorrow you'll do it all again, jam or no jam. You stride through the city, navigating puddles, stray cats, and men who think a whistle is a compliment. Your shoes pinch, your hat's crooked, and you're praying today's rain holds off until you make it to the office. Every block is another chance to reconsider your life choices. The sidewalk outside the boarding house is a patchwork of uneven concrete and last night's mystery stains. Step 1 is finding your rhythm. Dodge the puddle by the stoop, hop over the loose cobblestone, and avoid the pile of something the local terrier left behind again. Your shoes, polished to a shine with borrowed Vaseline, start pinching before you've made it to the corner. It's a daily wager, which will give out first, the leather or your toes. City mornings are noisy and alive. Horns honk with no apparent reason, trolleys rumble past in a fog of exhaust, and the air smells like a bakery collided with a coal plant. You join the tide of office girls, all dressed in the same practical with dreams of Paris uniform. The hats are cloche, the gloves are hand-me-down, and every coat is 2 winters past its prime. No one looks twice at the line of hopefuls at the bus stop, each woman cataloguing whose shoes are most likely to survive a rainstorm. As you walk, the hazards multiply. There's the threat of being splashed by a passing taxi, the chaos of a broken umbrella flipping inside out, and the ever-present gauntlet of street vendors offering everything from yesterday's papers to suspicious sausages. You're on the lookout for the city's unofficial mascots, stray cats that rule the alleyways and occasionally stage a sit-in on your intended route. If you're lucky, they only glare. If you're unlucky, you've got cat hair on your skirt for the 3rd day running. And then there are the men. Some offer the benign good morning. Others feel compelled to deliver their opinions on your smile, your stride, or your stocking seams. A whistle here, a hey sweetheart. There, it's an unwanted symphony, the background music to your commute. You keep your eyes forward, your pace brisk, and practice the time-honoured art of ignoring everything but your own destination. In your mind, you rehearse witty comebacks you'll never use. After all, it's 1934. Chances are your best defence is speed and a well-timed glare. Crosswalks are a test of faith and agility. There are no walk signals, just a mass of humanity, and the hope that the trolley conductor is in a generous mood today. You clutch your bag, skirt the edge of a delivery truck and make it across with seconds to spare, heart pounding in your chest. Somewhere, someone's already late, sprinting in heels that deserve a medal. The weather is a wild card. It could be rain, wind, or the dreaded combination of both. Umbrellas are more decorative than useful, flipping inside out at the faintest hint of a gust. You've learned to tuck your hat down, hunch your shoulders, and make yourself as aerodynamic as possible, a technique you've perfected after dozens of sprints between awnings. If you reach the office dry, it's a small miracle. If not, at least everyone else is equally soggy. But there's also a strange camaraderie in the shuffle. The same faces day after day, the grocer's wife in her navy blue coat, the newspaper boy with his lopsided grin, the other women from your building all braving the city together. You trade sympathetic glances, share quick smiles, and sometimes, when the world seems extra bleak, someone cracks a joke about shoes that could double as rowboats. By the time you arrive at your building, cheeks flushed and feet throbbing, you've already survived a gauntlet worthy of its own parade. You smooth your skirt, straighten your hat, and summon a version of yourself that's ready for whatever the day throws next, knowing full well that tomorrow it'll be another walk, another puddle, and another chance to strut, however wobbly, down the sidewalks of single womanhood in the 1930s. The office is a jungle. You're one of a dozen women elbowing for desk space, battling for the good typewriter, and dodging the boss's suggestions on your hairstyle. The pay's low, the coffee's burnt, and job security is just code for don't get married. You arrive at the office with rain-damp hair, shoes that pinch, and a polite smile you'll have to wear for the next 8 hours. The elevator is packed tighter than a sardine can, full of the perfume of last night's onions and the undertone of collective anxiety. You shuffle in, make small talk about the weather, because weather, unlike salary, is a safe topic, and steel yourself for the daily marathon that is secretarial work in the 1930s. The office itself is a battlefield of clacking typewriters, ringing telephones, and sharp-tongued women who can spot a missing carbon copy from across the room. Every desk is a small, precarious kingdom, your own space if you can keep it. Desk supplies are currency, a sharp pencil, a new eraser, or the legendary bottle of whiteout someone managed to squirrel away from the supply closet. The real prize, though, is the good typewriter, oiled, responsive, and only prone to jamming on Wednesdays. Get stuck with old Clanky, and you'll spend your morning apologising for mysterious typos and letters that only appear when struck with the force of an Olympic athlete. Your day begins with a stack of dictation so high it could double as a defensive wall. The boss, Mr. Hendricks, is a man of firm opinions and questionable aftershave. He stalks the aisles, dispensing advice no one asked for and offering hairstyling tips with the authority of someone who has never met a bobby pin. Maybe a little less curl tomorrow, Miss Brown. Clients like a professional look. You nod, knowing that any attempt to comply will be ignored the moment he decides waves are in this week. Your typing speed is your armour. 42 words per minute is the baseline. Anything slower, and you're branded a liability. Anything faster, and you're seen as showing off. You find yourself in a silent competition with every other woman in the room, glancing up to see who's finished their stack first, whose carriage return dings with confidence, whose hands fly across the keys like a jazz pianist on payday. If you pause for a breath, someone will try to slip their copying onto your pile. Teamwork, 1930s style. Coffee breaks are a ritual, less for the coffee, which tastes like burnt cardboard and is probably just yesterday's reheated grounds, and more for the gossip. Here is where alliances form, secrets are traded, and the latest news about who might be getting engaged, or worse, fired, gets whispered between sips. You swap stories about bosses, compare lunches, and offer each other reassurance. Don't worry, they say Mr. Hendricks only yells like that because his wife won't let him keep the dog inside. The actual work is relentless. Letters to type, invoices to file, forms to fill, all while smiling at every visitor, answering phones, and making sure the company's image of professional and welcoming is preserved. You become a master at double tasking. Foot on the pedal, one eye on the ledger, one ear on the boss's door, all while silently praying that the mimeograph machine doesn't choose this moment to belch out a purple ink disaster. And always lurking is the unspoken rule, don't get married. Job security in the 1930s is a fragile thing, more a privilege than a right. The minute you so much as hint at engagement, the office starts to look for your replacement. Married ladies don't last, the older women warn, and you can see it in the glances exchanged over the adding machine. The second a ring appears, so does a stack of exit paperwork. When 5 o'clock finally crawls around, you're exhausted, ink-stained, and half deaf from a day of ringing phones and typewriter bells. But you made it through the gauntlet. You pack up, wave goodbye to the other survivors, and remind yourself you'll do it all again tomorrow. Because in the jungle of the 1930s office, Survival isn't about strength, it's about speed, stamina, and the ability to laugh at the absurdity of it all. It's noon, and you and your co-workers pull together a feast of saltines, canned soup, and hope. Someone's always angling to trade a sandwich for a slice of cake, and the highlight is swapping tips for surviving on 30 cents a day. Luxury? Splitting a chocolate bar 3 ways. Lunch in the office break room isn't so much a break as it is a communal exercise in improvisation and thrift. The dining area is a repurposed supply closet with a sticky table, a window that only opens when it feels like it, and chairs that creak ominously with every movement. You squeeze in with the other secretaries, each brandishing their lunch pail with the quiet pride of a survivor. Inside, culinary wonders only the Great Depression could produce. Today, your meal is a generous handful of saltines, carefully wrapped in wax paper, slightly stale, but still a step up from Gladys's mystery loaf. Next to you, Mabel unveils a can of tomato soup, ready to be eaten cold if the office kettle is still missing its plug. Someone always brings an apple, usually bruised, and there's inevitably a debate about whether it's worth saving the core for tomorrow's oatmeal. The real star of lunch, though, is the swapping and scheming. "I'll trade you my hard-boiled egg for half your sandwich," offers Betty, eyeing the peanut butter with the intensity of a Wall Street broker. You calculate the trade, weighing protein versus pleasure, then remember last week's debacle, someone swapped a slice of cake that turned out to be just the heel of a raisin loaf. Salt is the most precious currency, followed closely by the last spoonful of strawberry jam. You pool resources, combine odds and ends, and sometimes when someone gets a package from home, you feast on an entire tin of actual sardines. For a moment, you're transported to the Ritz, until the landlady's cousin, who works in accounting, sticks his head in to remind everyone there's a strict no-loitering policy. Between bites, the conversation turns to advice, both the solicited and the sort that arrives uninvited. Ethel has a theory about stretching a nickel. Buy day-old bread, toast it twice, and no one will know the difference. Mabel swears by adding evaporated milk to coffee and soup alike, claiming it's a secret weapon against afternoon fatigue. There's always a new tip about cheap hair tonic or a miracle recipe for potato pudding that supposedly doubles as shoe polish in a pinch. You laugh at the absurdity of it all, grateful for the camaraderie. In these moments, poverty is a group project, and the hardships go down a little easier when shared. If someone's sandwich falls to the floor, there's a chorus of 5-second rule and a quick salvage. On Fridays, if the mood is right, someone might reveal a hoarded chocolate bar, breaking it into even slivers so everyone gets a taste. That single mouthful of chocolate feels like the height of decadence, proof that small joys survive even in the leanest times. The backdrop to all this is the office radio, faintly playing big band music or the latest news. Sometimes it's the boss's voice echoing down the hall reminding everyone of the time, but for these precious minutes the break room is its own world. No ringing phones, no looming deadlines, just the click of salting tins and the hum of low conversation. When lunch ends, you wipe crumbs from your skirt, share a conspiratorial smile, and make a silent vow to try that miracle potato recipe, maybe. You return to your desk, fueled less by calories and more by companionship, ready to face the afternoon's pile of paperwork with the certainty that, at least tomorrow, there will be lunch again, and with luck, a fresh tip for making beans taste like beef. Because in the secretarial gauntlet of 1930s America, resilience is measured in small bites, shared stories, and the hope that next week's cake is the real thing. Back home, the landlady rules with an iron apron. She tracks comings, goings, and hemlines, always ready with a lecture about decent girls. Pay rent late, prepare for extra chores, laugh too loudly after 9 p.m, expect a note under your door. Living under the watchful gaze of a 1930s landlady is not unlike starring in a never-ending morality play, except the costumes are less glamorous, and the applause is replaced by disapproving clucks. Mrs. McCloskey, and there's always a Mrs. McCloskey, has eyes in the back of her head, ears like a bat, and a sixth sense for scandal. She knows who missed curfew, who tried to sneak in after midnight, and which lady might just be entertaining a gentleman caller without proper chaperoning. Privacy in the boarding house is purely theoretical. Your life is an open book, and the landlady is always ready to scribble in the margins. Every evening as you trudge home from work, you can count on a status update before you even reach your room. The click of her sensible shoes echoes down the hallway as she performs her nightly inspection. checking for muddy footprints, unauthorized visitors, and the cardinal sin of leaving a teacup unwashed in the common sink. If your skirt's an inch too short or your laughter a decibel too high, you'll hear about it directly and at length. The rent ledger is her holy scripture, and woe betide anyone whose payment slips past the first of the month. A missed rent means a conversation, always at full volume and never in private, followed by an impromptu assignment to scrub the stairwell, shovel coal, or help polish the mysterious collection of ornamental plates in the parlour. Idle hands, she insists, invite trouble. You're not sure about the trouble, but the calluses on your hands are definitely new. But it's not just chores and surveillance that fill her day, it's the business of character building. A respectable young woman doesn't return home after dark unless she wants to be mistaken for a chorus girl. No lipstick at breakfast. Shouting out the window is not ladylike, even if the milkman is late. Her lectures are endless, delivered as if she's single-handedly holding back the moral collapse of Western civilization, one scuffed shoe at a time. She keeps a ledger of more than just money. There's a list somewhere of who's had gentlemen callers, who's missed church, and who's been caught reading questionable magazines. You learn quickly to keep your romance novels hidden behind great lives of American statesmen. Even the radio is suspect, too much jazz, and she's convinced you're planning a speakeasy in the cellar. Sometimes her vigilance veers into the absurd. She's convinced Gladys is running a gambling ring because of a weekly poker night with stale crackers and pennies. Ethel, who knits late into the night, is accused of plotting something subversive with the wool. If a phone call runs over 5 minutes, she'll tap her foot until you hang up, then quiz you on the conversation, for your own good, dear. And yet, for all her rules and relentless supervision, there's a strange security to Mrs. McCloskey's reign. She'll slip an extra lump of coal under your door on the coldest nights, mend a torn coat with expert hands, or serve up a surprise batch of molasses cookies when someone's lost their job. Her care is real, even if it's hidden under layers of starch and suspicion. Surviving in her house means learning to live by her rules, or at least pretending you do. You become adept at slipping by unnoticed, sharing coded glances with your fellow boarders, and laughing quietly at her latest conspiracy theory. Because while the landlady may rule with an iron apron, deep down you know she's just trying to keep her little kingdom together, one nagging note at a time. And really, is that so different from what you're doing? You share your room and your best scarf with 2 other women and the ghost of everyone who's ever left a stocking in the closet. Sometimes you're confidants, sometimes Cold War adversaries. The only sure thing is the ongoing debate over who finished the last of the jam. Living with roommates in a 1930s boarding house is a masterclass in diplomacy, patience, and the art of silent resentment. Your room is a patchwork territory, each corner claimed by a different personality and a rotating collection of battered suitcases. There's Gladys, who collects hairpins with the passion of a museum curator, and Ethel, who has a sixth sense for when you're hiding anything edible. The morning routine is a carefully choreographed ballet of elbows and oops, sorries. Toothpaste disappears, only to reappear when it's too flat to squeeze. Socks migrate mysteriously from one bed to another, and no one is ever quite sure whose slip is drying on the radiator. You all pretend the drafty window isn't a problem, as you pile up coats and, in the most desperate months, even extra newspapers, just to keep the chill at bay. Some mornings, you're the best of friends, collaborating on laundry day, pooling change for a communal bar of chocolate, or helping each other pin curls before work. You swap stories, advice, and the occasional life plan. It's a support network in a world that rarely offers single women any support at all. A new lipstick shade is a cause for celebration, an extra ration of butter, a minor holiday. But not every day is a festival of sisterhood. Sometimes the tension is thick enough to slice with a butter knife, if you can find one that hasn't been borrowed for shoe polishing duties. Maybe someone borrowed your good scarf just for a minute, and you spot it 3 days later draped artfully around Gladys's neck at Sunday church. Maybe Ethel's snoring has kept you up for a week, and your only solace is plotting to swap her tea leaves for lawn clippings. Passive-aggressive notes appear. Who used my cold cream? Why are my nylons in your drawer? The next person to finish the jam will answer to me. Every object is communal until it's missing, and then it's suddenly private property. You become adept at hiding valuables, chocolate, good soap, a working pen, in places no rational person would think to look. Tucked inside a shoe, beneath the mattress, or behind a stack of overdue library books. You learn to listen for the creak of floorboards at midnight, a sure sign someone's raiding the snack stash you thought you'd hidden so well. Despite the daily skirmishes, living together is about more than shared space and shared miseries. It's about finding family, or at least the closest thing to it. When the world outside feels cold, judgmental, or just plain exhausting, there's comfort in knowing someone will be there to split the heating bill, help you mend a tear, or sneak you a biscuit when you're feeling low. Even the arguments become stories, retold with laughter long after the actual jam is gone. In the end, you all know you're stronger together than apart. The landlady's rules, the city's disapproval, and the daily grind all fade a little when you're facing them as a team, even if it's a slightly dysfunctional one. You finish the day in a tangle of blankets, feet sticking out from opposite corners of the bed, laughter echoing against peeling wallpaper, and the silent truce that tomorrow someone else can deal with the jam crisis. Because in the boarding house trenches of 1930s America, roommates are both your fiercest rivals and your closest allies, and somehow, impossibly, you wouldn't have it any other way. At 26, you're a spinster in the eyes of your Aunt Edna, and possibly the grocer. Every visit home is a barrage of questions. Any nice young men at the office? Have you tried smiling more? Even the cat seems to judge. It's a strange sensation, being declared past your prime before you've finished growing your adult teeth. The 1930s, with all its soup lines and radio jingles, reserves a special anxiety for unmarried women. No matter how poised you appear or how gainfully you're employed, there's a little clock ticking somewhere in the background, one that everyone, from distant cousins to well-meaning neighbours, is all too eager to wind. You notice it first in the questions. At family dinners, your mother carves the roast and carves out a slot for you to mention any nice young man. Your Aunt Edna, who, for the record, is on husband number 3, offers relentless advice. Try rouge, walk straighter, don't look too smart. Why not join the church choir? I hear the new tenor is single, and, well, not unpleasant. The implication is clear. Your worth is not measured in clever conversation or clever budgeting, but in your ability to attract a husband before your next birthday cake requires fewer candles. Even the grocer, handing over your weekly bag of potatoes, offers a pointed, "Cooking for one again, dear?" The postman asks if you want your mail delivered to Miss or Mrs., as if a typo might correct your marital status. The laundress wants to know why you never need shirts pressed for a man of the house. The city, it seems, is in on the conspiracy. It doesn't help that everywhere you look, society's image of success is paired off in twos. Movies show radiant couples gliding across ballrooms, magazines give advice columns on how to snag a man in 10 easy steps, and even your landlady eyes you suspiciously if you spend too many Saturday nights at home. There are tips for everything: how to make a budget meal, how to mend a stocking, and of course, how to catch and keep a man before you become, in the eyes of the world, a confirmed spinster. You develop coping strategies, mostly involving sarcasm and strategic misdirection. If someone asks why you're single, you tell them you're married to your career, which in reality is more of a high-maintenance pen pal than a life partner. When Aunt Edna suggests you take up flower arranging, you say you're learning jiu-jitsu instead, just in case. Sometimes you invent a suitor. Harold, from the office, travels a lot. Quite shy, you wouldn't know him. Other times you just shrug and say you're waiting for the right depression to come along. Even your cat seems to join in the chorus of raised eyebrows, staring at you with that unblinking feline judgment as you eat dinner solo. If pets could talk, you're certain the first words out of their mouth would be, "So have you met any nice tomcats lately?" Underneath the jokes, though, is a quieter truth. There's freedom in being single, a kind of unruly independence you can't find in any etiquette book. You pay your own bills, chase your own dreams, and answer to no one but yourself, and the landlady. You make your own fun, create your own traditions, and, when the world turns a cold shoulder, you wrap up in the warmth of knowing your worth isn't measured by someone else's ring. Still, some nights the weight of other people's expectations presses in. You wonder if the world will ever see you for who you are, capable, clever, resilient, or if you'll always be just Miss So-and-so, still not married. But as you slip into bed, another day survived, you can't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Because in 1930s America, if you're going to carry the label of spinster, you might as well do it with your head held high, a sense of humour, and the stubborn pride of someone who's truly, defiantly, herself. A date is as much negotiation as romance. You're expected to act interested, but not too interested, and dinner might be a shared sandwich in the park. Your greatest luxury? Someone who can afford pie and coffee. Let's start with expectations. In the 1930s, dating is a full-contact sport. Part old-fashioned ritual, part modern survival strategy. Forget candlelit restaurants or elaborate bouquets. The Great Depression has rewritten the rules. Every outing is a delicate balance between thrift and showmanship, with just a hint of desperation sprinkled on top. You're not looking for a soulmate, you're hoping for a free slice of cake, and maybe someone who doesn't chew with his mouth open. Romance, Depression-era style. Begins with logistics. Will you meet at the soda fountain? Or can someone spring for bus fare to the cinema? Matinee, of course. Never evening rates. You dress up in your best outfit, the one that hasn't yet succumbed to moths or last week's spilled soup, and pin your hair just so, all while praying your stockings don't choose this exact moment to sprout a new ladder. Courtship is a careful dance of maybe and not yet. You're supposed to giggle at jokes, but not so loudly that you seem fast. You're meant to compliment his tie, even if it's frayed, but also avoid looking too eager, because eagerness is the sworn enemy of dignity and long-term prospects. Every gesture is decoded. Did he open the door, pay for your soda, or just nod toward the vendor and expect you to foot your own half? The reality is often humble, sometimes hilarious. Dinner can be two people splitting a ham sandwich, each pretending not to notice the other counting bites. A picnic in the park means sitting on a slightly damp bench, swatting away persistent pigeons, and making small talk over limp lettuce and dreams of roast beef. If you're lucky, the weather cooperates. If you're not, you end up racing for cover arm in arm under a single battered umbrella. That umbrella, by the way, might be the most romantic prop you get all year. On special occasions, you might find yourself at the movies, choosing a seat in the balcony where the tickets are cheaper and the view of Clark Gable is mostly unobstructed. There's a nervous thrill in sitting side by side in the dark, hands occasionally brushing over a shared bag of popcorn. The rules are strict. No hand-holding unless you want your reputation in tatters, and absolutely no lingering in the lobby after the film, lest Mrs. McCloskey's friend from church happens by. For many men, impressing a lady means stretching every nickel. Some get creative. One fellow boasts about his job at the tyre factory, laid off, but only temporarily. Another waxes poetic about the time he met a real-life senator. At least he thinks it was a senator. Might have just been a tall man in a suit. You listen, nodding at all the right moments, careful to seem impressed but not too enthusiastic, because showing too much interest can be just as risky as showing none at all. If your suitor manages to buy dessert, you take careful note. Pie and coffee is the Depression equivalent of a diamond ring. Chocolate cake? You call your mother immediately. But most dates end with a handshake, a polite thank you, and the hope that your friends won't dissect every detail at tomorrow's lunch. Beneath the awkwardness, there's genuine hope, a flicker that maybe, despite the odds, love is possible, even on a budget. You cherish the small gestures, a flower picked from a vacant lot, a note folded into your pocket, a shy compliment about your laugh. Even in hard times, romance survives, huddled with you on the park bench, making the best of ham sandwiches and shy glances. Because in 1930s America, sometimes love is just two people sharing crumbs and the wild hope that things will get better someday. Your married co-workers can stay out late, gossip and drink cocktails at the local club. You, a glass of lemonade after 7 p.m. gets you labelled fast. You quickly learn, for every social rule there's an exception, and it never applies to you. Let's talk about rules, specifically the ones written in invisible ink for single women in 1930s America. The workplace is a microcosm of these unspoken codes. Married ladies share risque jokes in the break room, recount late-night escapades at the local jazz bar, and breeze into work after a raucous night, greeted with knowing winks and boys will be boys, but girls will be girls. You, on the other hand, arrive home at 7:05 p.m. after an extra-long bus ride and find yourself the subject of raised eyebrows and murmurs about modern ways. It's an acrobatic act, this life. You're meant to be friendly, but not familiar, sociable, but not social. If you stay late at the office, dedication. If you stay late anywhere else, suspect. Married women can flirt, dance, and drink cocktails with impunity. They're taken, safe from scandal, apparently shielded by their wedding bands. You, meanwhile, are one lemonade away from being branded a wild woman. Even your choice of beverage is scrutinised. Order a lemonade? Innocent? Unless it's after dark, then you must have intentions. Ask for a ginger ale at a speakeasy? Scandalous! Unless you're accompanying someone's wife, in which case it's girls' night out. It's not just drinks. Married women can invite a male co-worker for lunch and laugh at his jokes. For you, even talking too long at your desk might spark a rumour. They can slip out for a smoke behind the building, swap the latest gossip and receive nothing but a tolerant chuckle from the boss. Try it yourself, and you're told to mind your reputation, lest someone think you're auditioning for a part in a pulp novel. Dating amplifies the absurdity. If your married friend goes dancing with her husband's cousin, it's keeping up appearances. If you're seen at the movies with a male companion, people wonder if a wedding announcement is imminent, or if you'll simply be asked to leave the boarding house. You try to laugh it off, inventing suitors or sudden headaches when things get too complicated. Sometimes you think of getting a fake wedding ring just for the privileges it bestows, a magic amulet against suspicion. The real injustice, though, comes in the form of unsolicited advice. A good girl never goes out alone, says Mrs. McCloskey. You must be careful with your reputation, warns Aunt Edna. Yet, every woman you know who's safely married seems to revel in flouting the very boundaries you're told are sacred. You'll understand once you're wed, they say, winking, before telling you their secrets. Midnight poker games, bathtub gin, scandalous stories from weekend picnics. In your heart, you know it's not about morality. It's about appearances. As long as you play your role, quiet, helpful, respectable, the city will tolerate your independence. Step outside the script and you're reminded, subtly or not, that there are limits. This unwritten social contract keeps you in your lane, eyes front, always just a step away from being talked about. But you're not alone in your frustration. At night, over shared cocoa and under whisper-thin quilts, you and your fellow boarders trade stories, venting the unfairness of it all. You find solidarity and laughter, mocking the contradictions, plotting tiny rebellions, a midnight stroll, a forbidden soda at the corner drugstore, a note left for a handsome stranger with nothing but your initials. It's not much, but it's enough. A small, stubborn assertion that double standards may be everywhere, but you don't have to live quietly beneath them. So you walk that tightrope, balancing respectability and rebellion, dignity and desire for a little fun. And when someone raises an eyebrow at your lemonade, you raise your glass right back. After all, if they're determined to find scandal, you might as well give them something to talk about. Every week brings a letter from home. Inside, updates on cousins getting engaged, warnings about the dangers of city life, and gentle reminders about your ticking biological clock. Replies require creativity, patience, and maybe some light fiction. Let's be honest, opening the mailbox in 1930s America is an act of courage. Sure, you hope for something romantic or thrilling, a mysterious envelope, a postcard from a far-off friend. But mostly, it's Aunt Edna's looping script, already whispering, well, have you found a nice young man, before you even break the seal. The letter is a familiar routine. It begins with pleasantries, drifts into weather reports, rainy again, but the petunias are thriving, and then launches into a play-by-play of every family member's romantic progress. There's always a cousin, it seems, getting engaged. Mabel's daughter, engaged to the grocer's son with such good prospects. Your second cousin Lila, already planning her third baby shower. She married her high school sweetheart, before it was too late. You start to wonder if the family calendar is just a rotating list of weddings and babies, with your birthday left off entirely, except as a deadline for finding someone before the next leap year. The real message comes sandwiched between lines about homemade pickles and the neighbour's new car. We're all hoping to hear good news from you soon. Sometimes it's gentler. Don't worry, dear, you still have time. And sometimes it's a subtle threat like, your Uncle George says he'll write to you himself if you don't hurry up and settle down. Even the family dog seems to be getting more marriage proposals than you, if the stories are to be believed. Warnings about city life are a staple. Be careful walking alone after dark, your mother warns, as if you're strolling through a den of iniquity every time you cross Main Street. There are reminders to save your pennies. You never know when you'll need to buy curtains for your own home, to avoid strange men on the subway, and to remember that a lady never eats lunch in public by herself. It simply isn't done. The subtext is always that the city is filled with dangers, and marriage is the one true insurance policy. Replying is its own Olympic sport. You learn to blend fact and fiction, weaving in just enough truth to keep them satisfied, but not so much that you end up with a surprise visit from Aunt Edna herself. Work is busy, but I've met so many nice people, true, but nice includes the postman and the lady who sells violets at the corner. I've been out dancing, well, Technically true if you count the time you tripped on the boarding house stairs and performed an impromptu solo waltz. You sprinkle in optimistic hints. There's a gentleman at the office who's very kind. You leave out the part where he's already married to his adding machine. If pressed, you might even invent a harmless beau, Harold, who's always conveniently out of town on business or recovering from a mild cold. It buys you a month's peace, maybe two, before the next interrogation by post. Beneath the meddling, though, there's genuine care, a kind of bumbling love that comes wrapped in hand-embroidered handkerchiefs and unsolicited recipes. Your family wants you happy and safe, even if their vision of happiness comes with a ring and a roast every Sunday. So you keep writing back. You thank them for the news, marvel at your cousin's fertility, and promise with your fingers crossed that you're keeping your eyes open for the right one. Because in 1930s America, every letter home is a tightrope walk between independence and expectation, and the secret hope that someday the only question they'll ask is, "Are you well?" instead of "Are you wed?" You wander the aisles of Woolworths, dreaming of a new hat, or maybe even a dress that doesn't look like it fought in World War I. Window shopping becomes a sport, and splurging on lipstick is the closest you'll get to luxury. It's a Saturday ritual, this slow promenade through Woolworths. The air smells like a mixture of floor polish, penny candy, and optimism, a brief escape from the boarding house and its eternal debates over jam and whose turn it is to scrub the stairwell. In the five and dime, your imagination can finally stretch out and get some exercise. Rows of hats perch on fake heads, each one whispering promises of a new you, braver, luckier, maybe just a little more likely to turn a certain gentleman's head on payday. You linger over the dresses, fingers brushing fabrics that, at first glance, look chic and new. Upon closer inspection, you realise some have seams that wander and patterns that might have made more sense in 1922. Still, you arrange the skirt against yourself, trying to see not the faded print but the possibility. In a world where new clothes are a luxury, even pretending is a form of hope. Maybe, with a snip here and a pin there, you could transform this tired frock into something approaching modern fashion, a Depression-era Cinderella story, minus the fairy godmother. Next stop, the accessories counter, where gloves and scarves are arranged like precious jewels behind streaky glass. There's a pair of gloves the colour of cream, just the thing to hide the ink stains from the office or the tiny burn from last month's disastrous attempt at boiled custard. You check the price tag, do some quick math in your head, subtracting this week's bus fare and last week's soap bill, and, with a heavy sigh, place them back with their sisters. Maybe next week if that rumoured raise ever materialises. The real treasure, though, is the lipstick. Tiny, shining tubes in shades of crimson, rose and daring coral. The salesgirl lets you test a sample, and for a moment the world feels suspended in glamour. You catch your reflection in the silver compact, lips now a bold slash of colour against the pallor of rationed coffee and cold oatmeal. The effect is almost magic. Lipstick, you decide, is not just for lips, it's for spirits. You buy a tube, telling yourself it's an investment in confidence, not vanity, a shield against all the looks, whispers and helpful advice. Window shopping becomes a sport, honed to perfection. You and your roommates make an afternoon of it, wandering past the displays and narrating stories about the lives you'd have if only you could afford the pink taffeta or the patent leather shoes. "This one's for my luncheon with Clark Gable," Gladys jokes, holding up a feathered hat that would make a peacock blush. Ethel tries on costume jewellery and affects a British accent, imagining she's off to tea with the Queen. There's laughter, mischief, and the brief sweet comfort of make-believe. There are other luxuries too, small ones that fit in your pocket and don't break the bank. A new handkerchief, fresh with factory starch, a tin of peppermints to keep in your desk for days when everything feels a little too grey. Sometimes, when you're feeling particularly bold, you splurge on a bottle of cologne, the sort that smells like violets and future happiness, even if it only lasts until your next load of laundry. By the time you leave Woolworths, your purse might be no lighter, but your mood is. For a little while, you've stepped out of the routine of careful budgeting and into a world of what-ifs and maybe soon. You tuck the lipstick into your bag like a secret ready for the next day's battles. In the five and dime, you aren't just a single woman in 1930s America. You're a dreamer, a schemer, and, if only for the afternoon, a woman with a future as bright as that bold red lipstick. You join the Temperance League, the bridge club, and maybe a book group, all in the name of networking. Social events mean lemonade, awkward dances, and fending off the local dentist's second cousin. Anything to avoid another evening with your roommate's harmonica. Navigating the social landscape as a single woman in 1930s, America requires as much skill as finding a matching pair of stockings. There's a club or committee for everything, a place for every nice girl to be seen, even if the only thing you really want is a quiet afternoon nap. Sunday mornings begin with church, a parade of hats and glances, the pews packed with families, old bachelors, and a handful of matrons convinced it's their personal calling to know who sits where and why. You're expected to show up bright-eyed and respectable, armed with a smile that says, "No, I haven't met anyone special yet, but thank you for asking." After service, it's a minefield of handshakes, subtle matchmaking, and reminders about next week's bake sale. The church bulletin is less about scripture and more about who is newly engaged, who's fallen ill again, and which young lady brought the most deviled eggs to the potluck. In the afternoons, you make your rounds, Temperance League first, where lemonade is poured with the seriousness of sacramental wine, and speeches about the dangers of gin are met with polite nods and a few well-hidden yawns. You join because, frankly, it's better than sitting alone at home, and there's always a chance someone's brought cookies. The older ladies are fiercely dedicated, handing out pamphlets, collecting dues, and giving you advice about keeping your virtue and your hemlines in check. Bridge Club is another battleground. You never quite understood the rules, but you're too proud to admit it now. Every Tuesday, you join the ladies at Mrs. Abernathy's, clutching your battered deck and praying you won't be paired with the widow Simmons, whose glare can wilt a houseplant at 10 paces. The gossip flows even faster than the card play. Who's walking out with the butcher's son, who's in line for a raise, and which newcomer showed up in a dress deemed too modern by local standards. If you're lucky, there's a book group. At first, it's thrilling, an escape into stories that don't involve shopping lists or supper menus, but soon, even here, the conversation drifts back to real life. Miss Jennings reads nothing but etiquette guides, and every meeting turns into a debate about whether ladies should wear gloves to dinner or just church. You listen, nod, and wonder if anyone will notice if you sneak out before the tea is poured. At every event, there's an undercurrent of matchmaking, a steady parade of eligible men, most of whom look like they'd rather be at home with the sports section. The local dentist's second cousin is always hovering, sweating through his suit, asking you about your opinions on the weather and municipal drainage. The dance floor is a minefield of awkward waltzes and sidelong glances, everyone painfully aware that every social misstep will be dissected at next week's meeting. Still, for all the forced fun and sticky lemonade, you're grateful for the company. These gatherings are a lifeline, a place to find allies, trade recipes, and share a few jokes at the expense of the town's favourite busybody. You build alliances over bridge tables, form silent pacts in the choir loft, and develop a sixth sense for when to dodge the "why aren't you married yet?" conversation. So you keep showing up, navigating the endless swirl of social obligations, fending off suitors and scrutiny alike. Because in 1930s America, survival isn't just about rent and rationing, it's about finding your place in a world that's always keeping score. And if it means enduring one more round of lemonade and off-key harmonica solos, well, at least you're not alone. The real backbone of your world is your friends, other single women weathering the same storms. You pool money, share jokes, and turn every setback into an inside joke. Your circle is your lifeline. In a world that treats single women as a curiosity at best and a problem to be solved at worst, friendship is your fortress. You learn early that strength comes not just from enduring alone, but from leaning on each other in the quiet moments and the noisy ones. The best currency in 1930s. America isn't cash, it's camaraderie, traded over chipped teacups and borrowed scarves. Your friends are the ones who rescue you from disastrous haircuts, help you salvage a burned pot roast, and never ever judge you for reading movie magazines under the covers. They're the first to tell you when your hem has come loose, and the last to let you spiral over a bad date. With them, every misadventure is a story, and every setback is a punchline waiting for its moment. You share everything, out of necessity and affection. If you find an extra egg at the grocer's, you split it 4 ways. A new lipstick is an event, tried on in the bathroom while everyone takes a turn preening in the mirror and declaring it your colour. A broken heart is handled with cocoa and sarcasm, plus the assurance that any man who leaves wasn't worth your best hatpin anyway. Solidarity isn't always soft. Your friends will call you out for moping, nudge you out the door when you'd rather wallow, and push you to ask for that raise or apply for that new job. even when it feels pointless. You return the favour, deploying gentle mockery when someone tries to romanticize their latest gentleman caller. Oh, a poet? Is he also unemployed, or is that just his hobby? There's a rough-edged affection to it, a language of teasing that makes the world's sharper edges a little more bearable. Together, you become experts at making do. You can turn a can of beans, a heel of bread, and half a wilted carrot into something resembling dinner. On good days, you pool your resources for a real treat, a tin of sardines, or even a bakery cake if someone's landed overtime. You learn that joy multiplies when it's shared, and that laughter, especially late at night with the city buzzing outside, is the best defense against gloom. Friendship is also strategy. You protect each other's secrets, about finances, about family, about that time someone accidentally dropped the landlady's prized vase. You band together against the world's judgments, against busybodies, unwanted advances, or the office's endless double standards. In the safety of your circle, you're free to say what you think, dream out loud, and admit just how tired you are. You celebrate each other's victories, big and small. Got through the month without borrowing from your emergency change jar? Cheers. Finally told off the catcaller on Main Street? Let's toast with lemonade. Landed a promotion or just survived another Sunday dinner with Aunt Edna? Your friends are there with a hug, a hairpin, and a plan for how to spend the extra $1. In the long nights, when doubts creep in and the world feels heavy, you know you're not alone. You remind each other, you're more than your marital status, more than your paycheck, more than whatever the papers and politicians have to say about modern women. You're survivors, dreamers, and, thanks to each other, a little bit braver every day. And in a world determined to keep you small, there's nothing quite so radical or so comforting as knowing you've got your circle by your side. You check the mailbox 3 times a day, hoping for something romantic. Usually it's a bill, sometimes a chain letter, occasionally a polite rejection from the job you actually wanted. True love is mostly theoretical. There's a certain optimism required to be the first one to the mailbox in a boarding house. Maybe today you think you'll find a handwritten envelope, addressed in looping script and heavy with promise. You imagine a letter brimming with secret affection, a bold declaration from a suitor too shy to speak in person. Instead, the reality is more likely a bill from the electric company, another reminder that your free sample of beauty cream costs 25 cents to redeem, or an invitation to buy 3 magazines for the price of 2 if you can rope in 5 friends. Still, hope springs eternal. You check the box before breakfast, just in case a letter arrived overnight, as if postmen roam the streets at midnight like Heartbreak's own Santa Claus. By lunch you wander past again, claiming you forgot your umbrella, eyes darting to see if maybe, just maybe, there's a corner of pink stationery peeking through the circulars. Evenings bring the most dramatic ritual. A slow walk down the front steps, the clack of your heels echoing your anticipation, only to find Gladys already beat you there, sorting the mail into bills, ads, and everything else. On the rare occasion when a letter does appear, crisp paper, actual stamp, maybe even a foreign postmark, your heart skips. Sometimes it's from a friend in another city, and for a few glorious minutes you're transported by news of new jobs, new romances, new misadventures. More often it's a polite but stilted note from a would-be suitor, heavy on the regret to inform you and light on the deepest affection. Some correspondences end before they even begin, with one last best wishes that reads like a funeral notice for your romantic hopes. Chain letters are the other main event. They promise luck, love, or even money, if only you send them to 5 more people, which would require more stamps than you can justify on this week's budget. You sigh, drop them in the kitchen drawer, and promise yourself you'll get around to it. Eventually. Occasionally, there's the thrill of a love letter, usually written on the sort of stationery you'd expect from a bank or a dentist. The handwriting is neat, the prose cautious. There's a lot of admired you from afar, and if it's agreeable to you, perhaps we might. You read it over tea, debate with your roommates about what deeply respects your character might actually mean, and, after much discussion, craft a reply that is kind but non-committal. No need to get anyone's hopes up, least of all your own. Mailbox disappointments pile up, but so do your secret daydreams. You imagine an envelope addressed in elegant penmanship, declaring undying devotion, and perhaps a ticket out of the boarding house. Instead, you tuck away the best letters, friendly, funny, or just comforting, in a shoebox under your bed. Some nights you read through them all, each one a reminder that while true love may be rare, connection is not. In the meantime, you make do with the laughter of friends, the possibility of next week's mail, and the hope that someday the letter at the bottom of the pile will be the one that changes everything. Until then, the mailbox remains a little altar of hope and disappointment, a ritual of patience, a lesson in letting go, and a small, stubborn testament to the belief that maybe, just maybe, love will eventually find your address. You rely on home remedies and positive thinking. Doctors are a last resort, especially when every visit ends in unsolicited advice about your diet or your relationship status. Vicks VapoRub and wishful thinking get you through. Staying healthy as a single woman in 1930s, America is a blend of stubbornness, creativity, and the ability to ignore symptoms that would send a modern hypochondriac running for WebMD. With a doctor's bill equaling a week's groceries, you get inventive. Chicken broth for a cold, hot water bottles for aches, and the occasional mustard plaster if you're feeling especially brave or desperate. The communal medicine cabinet in the boarding house is a museum of folk wisdom and half-empty bottles. Vicks VapoRub holds pride of place, slathered on chests and dabbed under noses with near-religious devotion. Sore throat? Saltwater gargle? Cough? A spoonful of honey if you can spare it, or maybe a slug of medicinal brandy if Gladys hasn't finished it off. For more persistent ailments, there's always Epsom salts, camphor oil, and the slightly unnerving tonic Ethel brews from onions and something she swears is just for flavour. Self-care is pragmatic, never glamorous. Showers are a rare luxury, reserved for Saturdays and special occasions, like landing a new job or banishing the flu from the room. Most days, it's a quick sponge bath with tepid water and the hope that the soap lathers enough to at least make you feel clean. Hair is washed as infrequently as dignity allows, and you develop a knack for creative updos to disguise the in-between days. You learn to press your blouses with just enough heat to kill the worst germs, and possibly ignite a sleeve. Every ailment comes with a chorus of unsolicited advice, most of it courtesy of the landlady or well-meaning neighbours. Mrs. McCloskey believes all problems can be solved with boiled onions, and is quick to recommend a little fresh air and a brisk walk, which coincidentally also keeps you out of the house and out of trouble. Your mother's letters include a rotating cast of remedies. Sleep with a clove of garlic under your pillow, tie a red string around your wrist, drink cod liver oil and think wholesome thoughts. You nod, smile, and stash the suggestions next to last year's advice on how to catch a husband through proper posture. Going to an actual doctor is a last resort. When you finally break down and see one, you pay the fee, sit in the chilly waiting room, and brace yourself for a dual diagnosis: mild anemia and terminal singleness. The doctor is quick to note that your complexion could be brighter, more beef, less beans, that you look run down, as if this is news, and that most problems would resolve if you just settled down with a nice man. Sometimes you leave with a prescription for rest, impractical, or for cod liver oil, unpalatable. More often than not, you leave with nothing but the bill. Infections, cuts, and mystery aches are treated with bandages, grit, and faith. Toothaches are ignored until chewing becomes an Olympic event, and even then you might just opt for soup and hope for the best. A minor fever gets you a day in bed, a bowl of broth from a roommate, and an extra blanket if you're lucky. Major illnesses? You hope it's just a 3-day bug and not the kind that requires calling your family or worse, your boss. Despite it all, you soldier on. You patch up minor wounds, trade cough drops, and create spa nights with what little you have: lemon water, borrowed face cream, and a fierce commitment to pretending you're all just a little under the weather. Because in the depression, resilience is part medicine, part magic, and entirely necessary. So you smear on your Vicks, say a small prayer, and promise yourself that next week you'll really get that checkup if the rent, the job, and the universe allow. You pay your own bills, patch your own leaks, and face the kind of existential loneliness that only comes from eating canned peaches in silence. Independence is empowering and exhausting, often in equal measure. Let's start with the bills. They arrive with grim regularity, stacking up on your nightstand in envelopes that seem to multiply like rabbits. Rent, electricity, a sliver of coal for winter, the phone bill, even though no one ever calls but Aunt Edna and the landlady's cousin from accounting. You become a master of mental arithmetic, juggling due dates and dimes, figuring out which final notice you can stretch another week, and which one comes with a landlady's glare or a mysterious thumping sound in the pipes. Every dollar is accounted for and every purchase is weighed for maximum utility. You develop an almost spiritual relationship with the household ledger, tallying up bus fare, groceries, the occasional splurge on a new bar of soap, or that rare, wild luxury, a movie ticket. Independence, it turns out, comes with more receipts than romance. When something breaks, and something always does, it's your job to fix it, or at least to pretend you know how. The window sticks in the summer and freezes shut in the winter. The faucet develops a stutter, offering either a torrent or a trickle and nothing in between. You borrow tools from Gladys, just for the afternoon, and attempt repairs using a combination of pluck, trial and error, and liberal application of whatever glue, string or chewing gum you have on hand. You quickly realise there is no instruction manual for single-woman plumbing, but you get by on stubbornness and the occasional prayer. There are moments when you feel triumphant, like the time you unblocked the kitchen sink with only a hairpin and a series of muttered curses, or when you successfully mended your stocking for the third time and it held up all the way to church. Each small victory is a quiet testament to your resourcefulness, logged in your memory along with the lessons of what not to use as a wrench. Hint, never the handle of your only hairbrush. But alongside the empowerment is a peculiar kind of solitude. At night, after a day spent wrangling invoices and leaky faucets, you sit at your little table, dinner spread out before you, a can of peaches, maybe a hard-boiled egg, and a heel of bread. The room is silent, save for the distant murmur of radios from down the hall and the odd creak of settling floorboards. There's no one to ask about your day, no one to share the last cookie, or to offer an approving nod at your DIY handiwork. You tell yourself you're savouring your own company, that this is the price of freedom. But some nights the silence stretches, echoing with every small decision and big uncertainty. You fill the quiet with music or books, maybe a letter home, or by listening to the city's heartbeat outside the window. On good days, solitude feels like a luxury, the space to dream, to scheme, to wander your own thoughts without interruption. On harder days, it morphs into loneliness, prickly and persistent, whispering doubts that even the bravest face can't entirely shoo away. Yet you remind yourself, this is your life. You chose it, shape it, and most days even enjoy it. You make the rules, break them, and find comfort in the fact that your mistakes are your own, and so are your small triumphs. The world might see you as a curiosity, or worse, a warning. But you know that independence is built from equal parts courage, ingenuity, and an appreciation for canned fruit. So you finish your peaches, wash your one dish, and promise yourself that tomorrow you'll find another leak to fix and another reason to be proud you did. You hunt for deals, chase the rumour of a sale on potatoes, and become an expert at making meals out of whatever's cheapest. The produce man knows you by name, and by your tendency to linger over the bruised apples. Let's begin with the Saturday morning ritual. Coins counted, purse clasped, and shopping list carefully written on the back of a bread wrapper. You set out with a single goal, stretch your week's food budget until it screams. The first stop is always the grocer's, where you scan the windows for handwritten signs announcing this week's miracle. Beans, 2 cents a pound, or potatoes, best price in town. If there's a line, you join it. Knowing a crowd means either a bargain or at the very least a better story for dinner. Inside, you make your rounds like a seasoned general surveying the battlefield. The bread is yesterday's, cheaper, a little tougher, but perfect for toast and bread pudding. Next come the vegetables, which exist on a spectrum from almost fresh to best for stew. You've learned the fine art of picking through the bins, finding the onions that aren't too soft, and the apples whose bruises can be sliced away and hidden under a generous sprinkle of sugar. The produce man offers a tired smile as you weigh your options. He knows you're not just after food, you're after possibilities. Shopping is a dance of decisions and compromise. You debate. Is this the week you splurge on an egg? Can you afford one slice of ham to stretch into sandwiches for 3 days? You eavesdrop on other shoppers for news of a butcher with cheap soup bones or a dairy with a secret discount on day-old milk. When you spot a familiar face clutching a sack of beans, you share a knowing nod. Today's haul is not just groceries, but survival in edible form. Back at the boarding house, your haul is modest but full of hope. A few potatoes, a fistful of limp carrots, maybe a can of tomatoes if you skipped dessert last week. There's pride in making do. You swap tips with your roommates. How to revive wilting lettuce, a bowl of cold water and a prayer, how to turn stale bread into pudding, how to stretch a cup of rice into an entire meal. If someone's mother sends a parcel from the farm, you all get a treat. fresh eggs, or, in a culinary jackpot, a jar of homemade preserves. The challenge is making meals that satisfy both stomach and soul. You become an expert in the Depression-era cookbook, part invention, part endurance test. Cabbage soup, potato cakes, bean salad, and mystery loaf, let's not ask, become staples. A dash of pepper or a cube of bouillon can make even the most humble dish feel like Sunday supper. When someone brings home a can of peaches or a single orange, you split it with reverence, turning scarcity into a celebration. Sometimes you splurge on a treat, a new tin of cocoa powder, a sprig of parsley, or a packet of lemon drops tucked into your pocket for when the world feels particularly bleak. The clerk might raise an eyebrow at your careful calculations, but you know every penny spent has its purpose, either for nourishment, comfort, or simply the joy of having something sweet after a long week. You head home, arms full, heart a little lighter. You know you'll be back next week ready to chase another rumour of discount beans and conjure something wonderful from almost nothing. Because in 1930s America, grocery shopping isn't just about filling a larder, it's about filling your life with hope, resilience, and the quiet pride of making ends meet, one bruised apple at a time. Magazines offer a dizzying list of do's and don'ts for single women. Don't speak too loudly. Never admit you like jazz. You flip through the pages, equal parts amused and horrified, then go right back to being yourself. It's a ritual almost as old as the boarding house's squeaky floorboards, settling in with a cup of weak tea and the latest issue of Modern Woman or The Good Housekeeper. You flip through pages festooned with smiling starlets and headlines promising to reveal the secret to landing a man before next Sunday. The advice columns are equal parts pep talk and thinly veiled warning. You learn that the path to romantic success is, apparently paved with caution, conformity, and a healthy dose of self-denial. The don'ts are relentless. Don't laugh too loudly or you'll seem unfeminine. Don't frown or you'll get wrinkles. Don't let your suitor see you without lipstick, ever, not even while gardening, swimming, or presumably fighting a house fire. Don't be too clever, warns one article, as if a stray demonstration of arithmetic might ruin your prospects for good. Never admit you read mystery novels, enjoy jazz, or, heaven forbid, have ambitions beyond perfecting your lemon meringue pie. You take in the diagrams illustrating proper posture for polite conversation and the endless bullet point lists. Smile often, but not too much. Speak, but let him lead. Express opinions, but only about the weather or the merits of a good roast. You picture yourself at dinner, nodding in solemn agreement as your date explains, for the third time, the intricacies of the municipal sewer system. True romance, it seems, is mostly about listening, smiling, and occasionally complimenting his tie. The magazines don't stop at conversation. There are entire pages dedicated to wardrobe, how to choose a hat that flatters but doesn't draw attention, the correct length for gloves, the scandalous nature of polka dots. You're instructed to select colours that suggest gentleness and reliability, presumably the traits men find most appealing in a future wife or a well-trained sheepdog. There's even advice on scent. A lady should smell faintly of violets, never of onions, cod liver oil, or ambition. At first, you're amused by the sheer absurdity of it all. But beneath the surface, there's a darker thread, a sense that being yourself is the last thing anyone wants. You imagine a parade of identical women, marching in step, careful not to outshine, outspeak, or outdream anyone in the room. It's enough to make you want to grow out your hair, start a jazz band, and take up competitive shouting just to prove you can. Despite the advice, you know you're not alone in your skepticism. You and your friends swap the worst offenders like baseball cards. Don't ever eat corn on the cob in public, recites Ethel. Don't mention politics or money. Gladys recalls a column that suggested never laugh at a man's joke, unless it's funny. But always pretend it's funny. You all dissolve into giggles, which would horrify the advice columnists, but feels like its own kind of rebellion. You dutifully try out a few tips. Sit up straighter at dinner, nod more demurely, wear a dab of cologne behind your ears. But after an hour of pretending to be a magazine heroine, you can't help but revert to your actual self, witty, opinionated, prone to snort laughing at your own jokes. And the world, surprisingly, does not end. You still get asked to dance, still trade glances with the newspaper boy, still have friends who love you for your spirited conversation, because deep down, you know that the right person, should he ever show up, will not only tolerate the real you, but actually prefer her. So you close the magazine, pour another cup of tea, and promise yourself that if you ever take dating advice, it'll be from someone who survived the depression on sass and hope, not silence and perfect posture. The holidays mean family dinners, festive decorations, and being quizzed about your life choices between servings of canned cranberry sauce. You practice your smile and prepare evasive maneuvers for every personal question. Holiday season, in 1930s, America is a study in contrasts. On the surface, it's all warmth and nostalgia, carols drifting from radios, and windows strung with garland someone found in the attic. Underneath, though, there's a low hum of anxiety, especially for the single woman making her annual pilgrimage home. You arrive, suitcase in hand, armed with a polite smile and a mental playbook of answers for every family member's favourite question. So, are you seeing anyone? Even the dog seems to peer at you with mild disappointment. The house is filled with scents you haven't smelled since last Christmas. Cinnamon, wood polish, and the unmistakable whiff of burnt pie crust. Your mother fusses over the roast, your aunt rearranges ornaments for the third time, and your cousins run wild, blissfully unaware of the future interrogation you're about to endure. You offer to help in the kitchen, but are shooed away. Don't you want to freshen up, dear? Which is code for, we need to whisper about your prospects before you can hear us. Dinner is an ordeal of its own. You settle into your seat, hoping for invisibility, but your luck runs out before the mashed potatoes are passed. You're looking well, beams your great-uncle, which you recognise as the preamble to a deep dive into your romantic history. Any news on the marriage front? Asks Aunt Edna, who always brings fruitcake and never brings subtlety. You take a tactical bite of turkey, chew slowly, and mentally replay every neutral answer you rehearsed on the train. The conversation ricochets around the table, gathering speed and volume. Your cousin Mabel's engagement is praised with clinking glasses and enough enthusiasm to register on the Richter scale. The newlyweds, barely out of high school, are quizzed about their first apartment, their plans for the future, and inevitably babies. When the spotlight swings back to you, you dodge gracefully. Oh, I'm keeping busy at work, or maybe next year, or would anyone like more cranberries? The secret, you discover, is to keep your plate full and your answers vague. Children dart beneath the table, relatives compare recipes, and your mother tells the same story about how you were the most precocious child in Sunday school. The subtext: what happened? You laugh at the right moments, help refill coffee cups, and ignore the not-so-subtle matchmaking attempts. You remember Charles from church. He's single now and has a steady job. You recall Charles as a boy who ate paste and drew moustaches on hymnals, but you thank them anyway. There's a certain comfort in the chaos. As the night deepens, the questions fade and the storytelling takes over. Your grandfather recalls Christmases past. Your father hums along with the radio, and even Aunt Edna is temporarily distracted by the annual game of cards. You sneak an extra piece of pie, glad for small mercies, and toast your fellow single cousins across the table, silent allies in this yearly battle. By the time you're pulling on your coat and hugging relatives goodbye, you're exhausted but unbroken. You survived the festive gauntlet, held your own through table scrutiny, and managed not to promise you'll bring a fiancé home next year. You step out into the winter night, breathing in the cold, grateful for quiet, and for the knowledge that, for all their questions, your family's only flaw is loving you loudly. Because in 1930s America, holidays aren't just about feasts and tinsel. They're a test of resilience, patience, and your ability to find joy between the cracks. And if you made it through another family dinner, you can handle anything the new year brings. Every month you juggle bills, pray for a raise, and hope you can pay rent before the landlord starts making suggestions about other ways to contribute. Spoiler, none are legal. The first of the month looms like a thundercloud on the calendar, a date circled in red, underlined, and possibly burned into your dreams. You wake up on rent day with a knot in your stomach, mentally adding and re-adding every coin you possess. There's the envelope marked "Rent, Do Not Touch," tucked under your mattress like the world's least exciting treasure. You count out the nickels and dimes, stare at the growing pile of "I owe us," and sigh. It always feels like a miracle when the total comes up even close to the amount you owe. The days leading up to rent are a marathon of thrift and ingenuity. You skip dessert, walk instead of taking the bus, and nurse a single cup of coffee for as long as humanly possible at the corner cafe. Every purchase is weighed. Can you do without new stockings this month? Is it really splurging if you just want your own bar of soap? Every penny saved is a victory, but the anxiety builds as the rent deadline approaches. The boarding house itself seems to take on a different atmosphere during rent week. Roommates are jumpier, everyone a little more competitive in their search for overtime shifts or last-minute sewing jobs. Ethel takes to accidentally borrowing your lunch if you leave it unattended. Gladys becomes obsessed with selling hand-knitted potholders to any neighbour within a 3-block radius. Someone always floats the idea of a get-rich-quick scheme, raffles, fortune-telling, or writing letters for the illiterate, but nothing ever quite pans out. Then comes the fateful knock at the door. Mrs. McCloskey, rent ledger in hand, spectacles perched on her nose like an executioner's blade. She makes the rounds, collecting envelopes, marking down late payers with an audible sigh. "A little behind this month, dear?" she asks, though she knows perfectly well the answer. If you can't pay in full, her suggestions range from extra chores, scrubbing floors, mending curtains, stoking the basement furnace, to more creative and completely inappropriate alternatives, always delivered with a knowing smile. You decline as politely as possible, offering instead to run errands, help organise the pantry, or update the house's record book. Negotiations ensue. Maybe you can pay half now, half on payday. Maybe you can trade a few hours helping with the younger tenants, or offer to repaint the stairwell. Again. The landlady weighs your proposal, her silence punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, with a look that says she's not quite convinced but doesn't have a better offer, she nods, and you breathe a little easier until next month. Meanwhile, you pray for a raise. Rumours circulate about bonuses and cost of living increases, but those never seem to materialise by rent day. You plot out your finances like a general planning a siege, balancing hope against reality. Every raise, if it comes at all, is immediately eaten up by higher rent or the price of coal. Yet somehow, you manage. You and your fellow tenants trade tips, celebrate tiny victories, I got 5 cents off potatoes, and help each other through lean times. Someone always seems to find a way, a mended skirt sold to a neighbour, a lucky bingo card, a relative sending a surprise dollar bill tucked into a birthday card. When rent is finally paid, you experience a heady rush of relief, followed by the sobering knowledge that the whole cycle will start again in 4 weeks. But for now, you allow yourself a rare treat, a decent cup of coffee, a magazine, a few moments of peace. Because in 1930s America, surviving the rent crisis is an achievement in itself, proof that you can face down the nickel and dime nightmares and live to tell the tale. Some days, your curls cooperate, your stockings don't run, and the soup actually tastes like soup. These are the moments you hang on to, proof that survival isn't just possible, it's occasionally fabulous. It starts small, a morning when you wake up feeling just the tiniest bit rested, sunlight peeking through the grimy boarding house window and landing right on your pillow. The usual clamour is softer, as if the universe knows you need a little mercy. The kettle boils, not with its usual banshee wail, but a gentle hiss, promising tea that doesn't taste like despair. You reach for your favourite dress, half expecting to find a new stain or an unsolvable tear, but no, it's perfectly presentable, pressed and waiting like a silent co-conspirator in optimism. The mirror, which on most days seems to delight in reflecting every wrinkle and worry, today gives you a look that says, actually, you're doing just fine. Your curls, usually a battleground between gravity and humidity, fall into place with shocking cooperation. It's almost suspicious. You try not to question it. Just pin them back and say a silent thank you to whichever household spirit is responsible. Breakfast feels almost decadent. The bread is still soft, the jam stretches just far enough for every bite, and, miracle of miracles, Gladys doesn't borrow your tea. Ethel cracks a joke instead of an egg, and you all laugh, a genuine belly laugh that ripples through the kitchen and lingers longer than the smell of burnt toast. On the way to work, the rain holds off and your shoes, notorious for their vindictiveness, choose not to pinch. The streetcar arrives with space to sit, and you find a magazine someone left behind, a month out of date but filled with stories and tips you haven't read before. You settle in, letting yourself enjoy the moment, the city outside for once a backdrop rather than a battleground. At the office, everything just works. The typewriter keys don't stick. The boss doesn't comment on your hair, or anything else for that matter. Your lunch, modest as always, tastes surprisingly delicious, and your co-workers' usual complaints sound less like grievances and more like banter among friends. You land a tiny victory, a thank you from a client, a compliment on your handwriting, a moment of quiet pride as you realise you're, against all odds, really good at this job. The afternoon brings a letter, not from a bill collector or Aunt Edna, but from an old friend. It's filled with jokes, stories, and a snapshot of a world outside your own. You tuck it into your pocket for later, already planning to read it again tonight, just before bed. Evening is more of the same. Dinner is warm and filling, the water for your bath is blessedly hot, and your roommates are in high spirits. You play a hand of cards, win, for once, and tuck yourself into bed early, heart a little lighter than it's been in weeks. It's these days, the small victories that keep you going. They remind you that life isn't just about making do, but about seizing whatever bits of joy the world offers up, no matter how modest. A good hair day, stockings without runs, soup that actually tastes like soup. These are the miracles you count. In a world that can be cold, capricious, and sometimes outright unfair, these flashes of grace are your proof that things can go right, that resilience is more than endurance. It's the ability to find celebration in the mundane. You fall asleep smiling, grateful for a day that gave you reasons to be glad. Tomorrow will bring its share of troubles, but tonight, you rest in the glow of these tiny triumphs, knowing they matter more than anyone else might ever realize. And that, in the end, is sometimes all the victory you need. At night you lie in bed, listening to the city's hum, counting blessings and cracked ceiling tiles. Tomorrow will bring more absurdity, more hustle, and if you're lucky, another day to laugh about it all with friends. The day's chaos finally settles, replaced by a hush, broken only by distant car horns and the rhythmic clatter of someone 2 floors down trying to coax heat from a stubborn radiator. The city glows through the thin curtains, turning your little room into a softly lit sanctuary. As you stretch beneath your scratchy blanket, the world feels both impossibly wide and cosily close, your own island floating in a sea of old bricks, secret dreams and insomnia. You stare at the ceiling, a map of water stains and hairline cracks, each with its own story. There's the crescent-shaped splotch from the year the roof leaked, and the spiderweb pattern you once decided looked a bit like the state of Ohio. You amuse yourself by tracing imaginary borders, your mind wandering across the landscape of worries and little victories. Rent is paid, for now. Your boss didn't fire you for the typo in that afternoon's letter. Ethel finally stopped snoring. Even if the soup at dinner tasted like warm dishwater, at least the bread was fresh. This is the hour for quiet inventory. You tick off blessings, both honest and slightly fabricated, because sometimes you have to count the ones you wish for as if they already exist. You're grateful for strong tea, good shoes, or at least shoes that made it through the rain, and the way Gladys made you laugh until you nearly spilled your evening cocoa. You're grateful, too, for the simple fact that you made it through another day, scraping together dignity, patience, and the occasional chocolate bar with a resourcefulness that would make any general proud. Your mind drifts to the absurd moments that colour your days, the landlady's relentless investigations, the mad scramble for hot water, the running debate over who borrowed whose scarf. You recall the jokes traded over lunch, the sympathetic glances when someone dropped their sandwich, and the silent solidarity as you all filed into the office. Soldiers in the battle of making ends meet. Even the setbacks, in hindsight, take on a certain comedy. Who else but your friends would celebrate a new can opener as if it were the Hope Diamond? Who but you would find poetry in a perfectly patched pair of stockings? Outside, the city's heartbeat pulses on. Someone slams a window, a stray dog barks at the moon, and a trolley clangs down the avenue. You let these sounds lull you. The reminders that life, for all its relentless demands, keeps going, messy, noisy, sometimes a little magical. You allow yourself a rare indulgence, the hope that tomorrow will be easier, that the bills will shrink, and that, with any luck, you'll discover a letter in the mailbox that isn't a bill or a chain letter. Before you drift off, you reach for the humour that keeps you afloat. You smile at the memory of your boss's crooked tie, the latest miracle beauty advice from the magazines, the ridiculous suggestion from the bridge club that perhaps you should just lower your standards a little. You resolve for the 100th time to keep your standards where you want them and to meet each day with as much sass as you can muster. Finally, you close your eyes, letting the gentle absurdity of it all settle around you. Tomorrow will bring its share of struggles, awkward conversations, lumpy soup, lost socks, but it will also bring laughter, friendship, and the quiet hope that somehow, in the middle of it all, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And so, wrapped in your blanket, listening to the city dream, you let sleep take you, knowing that in 1930s America, survival means finding humour in the hard parts, hope in the humble, and a little light in every long, ordinary night. There's nothing quite like the drama that erupts over a missing stapler or a suspiciously depleted bottle of correction fluid. Alliances are formed and broken daily in the secretarial trenches, all under the watchful gaze of a boss who's convinced women only gossip about hosiery. If you survive a week without being accused of borrowing someone's pencil, you're basically office royalty. The office landscape for a single woman in the 1930s is a minefield of shifting loyalties and silent battles. The secretarial pool is packed tighter than the lunchroom coat rack in January. Everyone has a territory, a preferred typewriter, a desk closest to the window, or a coveted spot near the radiator, which only works on Tuesdays, but still. Woe betide the newcomer who doesn't know the unspoken rules, never touch someone else's mug, always return the scissors, and never, ever admit if you know who finished the last of the ink. It's amazing how something as small as a stapler can unleash chaos. One moment, the office is humming along, the sound of typing and the shuffling of memos filling the air. The next, Miss Carter is interrogating anyone within earshot, eyes narrowed, convinced her precious office property has been pilfered. Accusations fly. I saw you at my desk. You always take the red ink. Who keeps moving my blotter? If diplomacy were an Olympic sport, secretaries would sweep the medals. The boss, Mr. Wallace, is blissfully oblivious to the real conflict simmering under his nose. He strides around, dispensing encouragement. Try smiling more, girls. Convinced the greatest threat to productivity is loose lips and misplaced lipstick. Meanwhile, real power is wielded by the one who knows where the fresh erasers are hidden, or who can sweet-talk the supply clerk into producing a new box of carbon paper when the rest of the building is rationing their last sheet. Alliances form quickly and break just as fast. On Monday, you and Mabel might be united against the tyranny of Miss Carter's endless memos. By Wednesday, Mabel is giving you the cold shoulder because you forgot to refill the teapot. Trust is a scarce commodity, especially when everyone suspects someone is hoarding the good paper clips. The filing cabinet becomes neutral ground, a Switzerland where grievances are put aside in pursuit of alphabetical order. Lunch breaks double as war councils. Over sandwiches and saltines, the latest office mysteries are dissected. Who keeps stealing the boss's newspaper? Why does the mail always go missing on Thursdays? Is it true Miss Harris can type 60 words a minute, or is she padding her stats? Theories abound, alliances are recalibrated, and by the end of the meal, half the office is united against the other, until the next crisis. And yet, despite the pettiness, there's a strange comfort in these daily dramas. Office politics may be exhausting, but they also provide structure, a way to mark time between 9 and 5. There's a sense of camaraderie, even, dare you say, affection, hidden beneath the squabbles. When someone's typewriter ribbon finally gives out, there's always a quiet act of generosity. A replacement ribbon left on her desk, no note, just the smallest hint of a smile from across the room. If you can laugh about it, and you learn to, you become part of a tribe that knows how to make the best of low pay, burnt coffee, and a boss with more opinions than sense. Surviving the secretarial trenches isn't just about skill, it's about diplomacy, endurance, and the ability to forgive whoever borrowed your pencil for the 1,000th time. So, you hang on to your stapler, guard your correction fluid, and join the eternal debate over who borrowed what. Because at the end of the day, these small skirmishes are proof that even in the blandest office, human nature finds a way to stir things up, and you wouldn't have it any other way. Every magazine swears by a new you, as long as you have time to squeeze in 5 minutes of calisthenics between double shifts and boiling your laundry. You practice your posture using soup cans and try a beauty sleep routine that mostly involves staying awake worrying about money. At least the jazz records make it feel a little more glamorous. If there's one thing the 1930s aren't short on, it's advice for self-improvement. The magazines on your roommate's nightstand are bursting with promises, 10 tips for a trimmer tummy, brighten your mood with lemon juice, and the classic charm your way to success. On paper, reinvention is easy. All you need is a sturdy chair, a bit of spare time, and an endless supply of optimism. Of course, reality has other plans. Your day begins with the world's shortest workout, 3 deep breaths, and an ambitious attempt at toe touches before you trip over Gladys's shoes. The 5-minute morning routine magazine editors swear by is more of a 2-minute scramble. Bend, stretch, dodge the boiling kettle, and hope no one notices you're still in your slip. If you're really feeling motivated, you haul out a pair of soup cans for resistance training, which mostly involves curling them a few times before the temptation to make tomato soup overtakes your commitment to fitness. Beauty routines are a comedy of improvisation. The latest articles recommend cold cream massages, cucumber masks, and rinsing your hair in rainwater. You do what you can with what you have: a little baking soda for your teeth, a dab of Vaseline for your elbows, and the rest is hope and clever lighting. Beauty sleep is a cruel joke. You'd sleep if you could, but the combination of financial anxiety, a squeaky mattress, and the sound of Ethel's midnight snoring means your routine is less restful rejuvenation and more strategic catnapping. Still, you persist. You try the latest dance craze workout, Jazzercise, the magazine says, will melt inches off your waist and turn you into a svelte siren. In practice, it means pushing the furniture aside, winding up the Victrola, and trying to keep up with a jazz record that moves at the speed of light. The neighbours probably think you're summoning the spirits, but for 10 glorious minutes, you're lost in the rhythm, worries melting away with each hop and twist. Self-improvement isn't just physical. There are endless suggestions for cultivating your mind, memorising poetry, learning a new word every day, or teaching yourself French in 10 minutes before bed. You dutifully recite a few lines of Emily Dickinson, practice your cursive, and, if you're lucky, sneak in a page of your favourite mystery novel. Magazines urge you to build your personal brand, but you're mostly focused on not spilling coffee down your last clean blouse. Meals are another arena for betterment. Healthy eating tips abound. Eat more fresh vegetables, they declare, blithely unaware that fresh is a euphemism for slightly wilted and half price. You experiment with beauty salads, a bowl of canned tomatoes topped with a solitary olive, sometimes enhanced with a cube of cheese if you're feeling flush. Every dish comes with a side of nutritional advice from your roommates, most of it dubious, all of it heartfelt. Despite the chaos and contradictions, you keep striving for that better you. Some days, self-improvement looks like a brisk walk to the library instead of the bakery. Other days, it's simply finding the grace to laugh at your own attempts. The soup can curls, the late-night jazzercise, the endless search for the perfect beauty routine that won't break the bank. And at the end of it all, you realise self-improvement isn't about transformation or perfection. It's about persistence, a little humour, a little sweat, and the belief that you're worth the effort, even if your only dumbbells are tomorrow's lunch. The jazz records help, but it's your stubborn hope that carries you through, one self-made, slightly ridiculous day at a time. When the weight of the world feels heavier than your wool coat, you treat yourself to a 10-cent ticket at the local cinema. For a few precious hours, you forget the rent and rationing as Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers make even heartbreak look choreographed. Popcorn is optional, sitting in the balcony is not, and leaving your worries at the door is strongly encouraged. A night at the movies in the 1930s is more than a luxury, it's an act of hope, a self-prescribed holiday for the soul. After a day spent dodging the landlady, juggling bills and surviving the secretarial gauntlet, you and your roommates squeeze into your best going-out coats and head to the flickering promise of neon lights down the block. The theatre's marquee, advertising romance and adventure, is enough to make you forget the soup that passed for dinner and the mystery stains on your best gloves. The ritual starts with a breath of warm, buttery air as you step inside, a welcome contrast to the city's chill. The foyer is crowded, couples on first dates, families with chattering children, and a handful of single women like yourself, all ready to lose themselves for 90 minutes in a world where the dresses are always pressed and no one ever runs out of lipstick. You clutch your precious ticket, careful not to crumple it, and make a beeline for the balcony. That's where the best seats are. Far enough from the screen to keep your neck intact. Close enough to watch every sparkle on Ginger's dress. Matinee or late show, the rules are the same. You pool your coins for one small box of popcorn, eaten kernel by kernel, and if someone's feeling especially flush, a single box of chocolate-covered raisins gets passed down the row. The hush before the film starts is part anticipation, part relief, a collective exhale as the house lights dim and the projector whirs to life. For the length of a reel, the world is perfect. Fred and Ginger glide across the stage as if their only worry is which foot comes next. William Powell solves murders with a wink, and Katharine Hepburn reminds you that being clever isn't just allowed, It's dazzling. The movie newsreel flashes stories from far-off places, and for a moment, you let yourself believe you might visit Paris or London too someday. You and your friends whisper commentary, stifling laughter when the romantic leads declare eternal love with exactly 3 kisses and no visible chemistry. There's camaraderie in the dark. Every heartache and triumph on screen is felt collectively, a sigh here, a gasp there, the shared giggles when the comedy is particularly sharp. If you need to cry, the shadows are merciful. If you need to dream, the big screen gives you permission. The walk home is slower, your steps lighter. The city feels softer after a night at the movies, as if the stories you've borrowed have sanded down the day's sharp edges. Conversation flows easily. Did you see the shoes on that actress? How did he catch the villain with nothing but a hatpin and a witty remark? There's laughter and mimicry, impromptu tap dancing on the sidewalk, a mock-serious imitation of a starlet's swoon. You all agree. Real life could use a little more choreography. You know tomorrow you'll be back to the grind, work, chores and rationed beans. But tonight, you hold on to the afterglow, the glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be as grand as the pictures on the screen. And when the world feels heavy again, you'll remember. For 10 cents, a balcony seat, and a couple of good friends, you can always escape, if only for an evening, into the bright spinning magic of the movies. The city changes after dark, windows glow, radios hum, and a breeze carries the smell of pretzels and hot asphalt. You might slip out for a moonlit stroll, or just sit by your window and listen to laughter drifting up from the street. No matter how tired you are, you always double-check the lock because in the 1930s, security is do-it-yourself in more ways than one. Nighttime in the city is a different animal entirely. Gone is the frantic shuffle of office girls and paperboys, replaced by a softer rhythm, the gentle clatter of dishes in distant diners, couples strolling arm in arm beneath dim street lamps, the whir of a car radio mixing with the distant bark of a vendor closing up his hot dog cart. The air is heavy with summer warmth, or on colder nights, with the crisp bite of early frost. Streetcars clang their last runs, leaving trails of electric light and echoing laughter that bounce down the alleyways. Sometimes you find yourself drawn outside, if only for a short walk. The neighbourhood feels both bigger and smaller in the dark. You nod to shopkeepers locking up, tip your hat to the old man with his dog, and keep a brisk pace past the bar on the corner, where the door swings open to spill out jazz and the rowdy promises of another Saturday night. Each shadow holds a story, some you know by heart, others you invent as you go, imagining lives more glamorous or mysterious than your own. You pause on the stoop, enjoying the hush, watching moths gather around the porch light. Up and down the street, windows flicker with life, silhouettes of families finishing supper, children being tucked into bed, a couple 2 doors down, dancing in their socks to the crackle of the wireless. You hear the faint strains of a trumpet solo, the clinking of a bottle, and the unmistakable giggle of friends sharing secrets on a fire escape. The city at night is an orchestra of ordinary magic. Some nights, you don't venture out at all. You pull up a chair to your window and let the world come to you. There's a comfort in this silent observation, a sense of belonging to something vast and bustling, even if you're alone. You trace the city skyline in your mind, picking out landmarks. The neon sign of the bakery, the bell tower 2 blocks away, the mysterious roof garden you swear you'll visit one day. The city's pulse beats steady, a lullaby of distant voices and fading headlights. Still, for all its charm, you know not to let your guard down. You check the lock on your door, twice, sometimes 3 times, out of habit and caution. The landlady says, "You can never be too careful," and for once, you agree. The newsreel is full of warnings about pickpockets, sneak thieves and wayward souls, but the real threats usually come in the form of missing rent or a misplaced key. So you tuck your valuables away, draw the curtains, and reassure yourself with the sturdy click of the bolt. On those rare evenings when fear creeps in, a shriek of tires, a shout in the alley, you remind yourself that this city is a patchwork of guardians, neighbours watching neighbours, ears pricked for the wrong sort of commotion. You trust in your own resourcefulness, in the kindness of strangers who might appear just when you need them most, and in the wisdom of never leaving a window unlocked, no matter how inviting the breeze. As you settle in for the night, you let the city's lullaby carry you. The world may be full of uncertainties, but here, wrapped in the comfort of familiar sights and sounds, you find your peace. Tomorrow the hustle will begin anew, but for now you let yourself drift, rocked by the steady hum of city lights, laughter, and the knowledge that, at least for tonight, you are safe in your little corner of the world. Beneath the routines, the ribbing, and the relentless advice, you still carry quiet dreams of travel, of art, of running your own shop or writing your own story. Some days, hope feels like a luxury you can't afford, but at night, with the world hushed, you let yourself imagine a future a little bigger, a little brighter, and maybe, just maybe, completely your own. It's easy to forget in the push and pull of 1930s survival that single women carry more than grocery lists and rent receipts in their pockets. Hidden between the pages of your well-worn diary, or folded into the hem of your favourite dress, are ambitions rarely spoken aloud. You dream of things that, at breakfast, sound fanciful, even foolish. Seeing Paris, painting landscapes, opening a tiny bakery that smells of cinnamon and freedom. Maybe you want to write a book, your own story, or the kind of mysteries you devour late at night by flashlight. You keep these dreams close, mostly because the world seems intent on tucking them away. There are always more pressing concerns, paying bills, mending blouses, sending polite replies to family letters filled with practical suggestions. The world is quick to remind you that security is more important than happiness, and that nice girls should settle for what's safe, not what stirs their souls. And yet, hope is a stubborn tenant. It lingers in the quiet moments, over a cup of tea, or as you watch the city lights blink awake at sunset. You let yourself imagine a different kind of life, one where ambition isn't a secret but a sunrise, where one day isn't a placeholder but a plan. Some evenings, you trace your finger across an atlas, inventing itineraries, a summer on the Italian coast, a winter spent learning to ski in the Alps, or just a train ride out of town heading somewhere that isn't here. Sometimes, the dreams get smaller, more manageable, but no less meaningful. You imagine a room of your own, sunlit and quiet, filled with stacks of books and the hum of a radio. Or maybe you picture the simple satisfaction of running a market stall, selling homemade jam and hand-sewn aprons, your name hand-painted on the sign. The beauty of these dreams is that they're yours, untouched by outside judgment or someone else's expectations. It's not that you're ungrateful for what you have. The friends who make you laugh until your sides ache, the modest victories that pepper your week, the satisfaction of keeping afloat when everything seems designed to pull you under. But the longing for more never fully leaves, the belief that you are meant for more than simply surviving. You see it in the way you linger over the travel posters at Woolworths, or the moments you pause mid-chore to jot down a phrase that might one day start a story. Of course, not every day is bright with hope. Some nights, the world feels heavy, and the distance between your current life and your future dreams seems insurmountable. But even then, you let yourself believe, if only for a moment, that everything could change. That the next letter, the next pay raise, or even the next lucky break could set you on a new path. You tuck these dreams under your pillow as you drift off, promising yourself not to let them go, no matter how loud or practical the world becomes. And you know, deep down, that you're not alone. All around you, in boarding houses and offices and kitchens and libraries, other women are making similar promises, to themselves, to the moon outside their window, and to a future they haven't given up on yet. So tonight, you let hope curl up beside you. You imagine the adventures that wait just past tomorrow, and you remind yourself that dreams, even deferred, are not defeated. Not as long as you keep daring to imagine, and quietly, stubbornly, plan. So tonight, as you settle into your bed, blankets tucked just right, no landlady threatening to raise your rent, and no one pestering you about your marital status, maybe take a moment to feel quietly triumphant. After all, you've just survived a day in 1930s America as a single woman. That's a marathon of budgeting, ironing, dodging unsolicited advice, and finding the courage to dream a little, even when society left the light bill unpaid. Remember, those women lived through more than their share of hard times, economic depression, social scrutiny, and the constant battle between hope and practicality. But somehow, they managed to stitch together friendships from thin air, share laughter over cold soup, and find small moments of beauty in a world obsessed with their relationship status. They carried on, one cracked teacup at a time, with a stubborn optimism that couldn't be rationed. So as you breathe in the comfort of hot water, privacy, and maybe even central heating, Whisper a quiet thank you to those who came before, the ones who showed that dignity isn't something handed out by society. It's built, joke by joke, between friends who borrow your last spoon of sugar and dreams you keep under your pillow. If they could survive a day with runny stockings and half a can of beans, you can definitely handle whatever tomorrow brings. Because history isn't just a catalogue of suffering and rules, it's proof that people are scrappy, stubborn and quietly hilarious. So rest easy. You've earned it. And tomorrow, well, there's always another day to laugh at it all. Good night.